Welcome to HOBI Conversations. I'm Steven Saunders. This podcast features the people leading our company and reshaping the ITAD industry in their own words. Real conversations about where ITAD is headed, what it takes to lead in this space, and why doing this right matters more than ever. We're not here to narrate the industry, we're here to move it forward. If you're deep in this world, finding your footing, or just trying to understand where the ITAD industry is headed, these conversations are for you. Let's get into it.
Here we go. So in your opinion, what differentiates a partner who simply just removes equipment from warehouses, offices, and how do we kind of manifest in sort of like a professional ITAD partner? What are the differences there?
You know, there's so many dimensions to this space now. We've been doing this for 30 plus years, and it has really moved from removing equipment to a multi-dimensional, multi-directional service. So, you can start at removing equipment, but you really have to back that up to life cycle management. So that's, getting together with our clients or even potential clients and understanding what their life cycles are and what their needs are and what they're looking for from an ITAD provider. So, we see everything from, monitoring ratios of equipment to employee, monitoring warranty cycles, monitoring certainly refreshes and service cycles. And so we have to look at all those pieces and really be on the front end of the management of the asset. So although we normally take care of the end of the first useful life, that's when we engage. It should be well before that, so that we're checking all the boxes for the client. And so then once we understand that, okay, we are engaged to take care of X number of assets, then we step in and determine that logistics piece, certainly hoping to make it as seamless as possible for the client, whether it be, a big office move, whether it be a big data center move, whether it be, a facility that has 300 sites in the continental U.S. or, across the world. What can we do to make that seamless, remove any headaches, and then step into making sure it's secure, that it's a secure move from the client site back to one of the HOBI facilities. And then the next, several layers have to do with, how we manage the assets once they arrive at HOBI. So that is, looking at, removing the data, reporting on the data eradication, reporting on the inventory, the, make, model, serial, et cetera.
Right.
Making sure that we are providing all those reporting to the client, whether it be, the data security piece, whether it be the inventory piece. And then we look at value maximization, so what can we do to monetize those assets on behalf of our client, if that's our role, or is the client looking at redeployment? Are they looking possibly at resale? Are they looking at harvesting parts, et cetera? And then the last piece, although equally important in my opinion, is the recycling piece as well. Is there a portion of the assets that we cannot monetize, that are not going to be redeployed? And then we start that process as well. And I think HOBI is a bit of a differentiator in the ITAD space, that we still do recycle in-house, we demanufacture in-house, we shred in-house, and then all of those components come together for full asset reporting. As we talked about inventory, we talked about data erasure, and then we talked about the recycling and sustainability piece to help our clients also tell their sustainability story, their carbon offset story, et cetera. So it's, there's so many dimensions, so many layers to it. And, one of the things that we have to remember, it's really not an equipment story, it's a service story, right? It's what services can we provide, what questions can we answer, what needs can we fulfill, how do we take this the asset disposition piece and move it from the client's desk to our desk and making sure we are hitting all the marks for the client that are specifically important to them. There's certain non-negotiables for hobbies, certainly data protection key, environmental protection key, right? But we want to make sure we're even above that cut line and saying, not only are we reporting all of this, not only are we doing this well to a certified level and hopefully beyond even, but then also, what has our client done to mitigate their risk, to meet their compliance initiatives, and to tell their sustainability story, and making sure that we're providing that to the client, and hopefully then engaging on the next refresh, and being ahead of come pick up our gear, right?
Yes.
We always want to be ahead of that.
Absolutely. That's actually a perfect segue into our follow-up question. It's where do you see the greatest risk for organizations when ITAD is treated just as kind of an end of life, come pick up our stuff, as opposed to a strategic function on the front end? And if you could speak to our data erasure processes, because when I'm in from my seat, when I'm having conversations with people, that is one or two of the most important things that they're saying is data erasure, certificates of destruction, is it secure? And I think people are starting to realize the implications of what we do. So if you could speak to that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so there's two big egress points, right? There is, that when the equipment moves to a hobby facility, we have to make sure we're providing the utmost security, whether it be full chain, whether it be tracked assets, and then also meeting with the client before the assets ever leave. What have you already put in place to secure assets? Maybe they're doing erasure on site. Maybe hobby needs to come on site and do erasure, do data destruction, drive shredding, etc. Right. And then once it gets to the hobby facility, we've got two huge components we look at. That is the data security question and then the regulatory compliance question, and making sure that we are looking at how, from both a data standpoint and an environmental standpoint, how are we processing those assets, right? And a couple differentiators for hobby. One is the methods around which we erase. Hobby uses an internally developed tool that is NIST compliant. We developed it many years ago. Why develop a tool when there's great tools out there, and there truly is? We found, especially in the early years, and again, this is going back a couple decades, hobby gets in a huge variety of equipment. And if today we're getting a drive that we have not seen before, technology we have not seen before, processor we have not seen before, we have engineers now on site that are modifying our erasure tools such that there's no lag time in processing the equipment. And it's called the Hobby Shield. That's on the IT side, and then on the cellular side, we have multi-level tools that we use to promise, full secured erasure or destruction, depending on what the needs are. Certainly, a failed drive is a different story. A failed cell phone is a different story. And then on the environmental side, we have, again, been in the game a long time. We still do manual destruction in-house and literally break down to, I don't know what the count is today, maybe 93 different categories of scrap, such that we have full transparency for all the weight that we handle. We provide mass balance reports as an R2V3 vendor. We're vetting all of our downstream, so we can absolutely track what happens to metals and precious metals and batteries and plastics, etc. So, when we're ultimately at the stage that we're meeting with our client and saying, okay, here's what has happened to your equipment, we can account for it by make, model, serial number. We can account for it by pounds received. We can show exactly what's happened from a resale and recycling perspective, so that we are indemnifying our client on those two big pillars, the data pillar and the environmental pillar. That's really why we're here. We're here to mitigate risk for our clients on both sides of that equation.
I love that. Something that has struck me in my time that I've been working at Hobby is just the project management function, jumping in at the inception of some of these projects and what that looks like. So my question would be, what makes ITAD fundamentally just project management discipline rather than just a kind of back-end logistics function for some of our multi-sided clients, and also now data centers and hyperscalers, just like the logistical feat and the project management function that Hobby can be a proponent of?
Yeah. That's such a great question, Stephen. And it really is, a project and process initiative. It is, to someone at the site, it may be, I need to get this equipment out, and, our end of year inventory cycle is Thursday and it's got to move and all of that. But hopefully we're well in before that, exchanging information about what needs to happen and why. And there's the whole process of managing not only the assets themselves, but the removal of the assets, the data destruction, the decommissioning. Sometimes we're moving into a data center and we're providing, for example, on-site data destruction or on-site erasure. We're looking at what all pieces need to be involved at the move of the material, whether it be decommissioning servers out of racks, whether it be doing on-site serialization of laptops, whether it be doing a collection event such that companies can round up, all their cell phones or all their distributed assets on a particular day. And then again, doing that logistics planning such that the assets are secure as they move. And also looking at, to some extent, the economics of that as well, planning with our client, to make sure that we're hitting their goals from an inventory reduction standpoint, from a warranty standpoint, getting assets in before warranties expire, making sure that we're helping them retire their software licenses on a timely basis. And then again, once it comes into the HOBI facility, making sure that we're looking at, data erasure, value maximization, and then environmental protection. So, I think everything we do pretty much sits on that three-legged stool,
Right.
but the nuances of the project are wide and diverse. And we really want to be, I remember many years ago, our first data center, and stepping in and knowing what HOBI did extremely well, or does extremely well, as far as protecting data, as far as decommissioning, as far as, cable mining and things like that, but getting all the parties around the table, because then you start looking at options of, maybe the client is looking to redeploy a certain percent of assets to keep, new equipment purchasing down. Maybe they're looking at, parts recovery for in-house hot swaps and things like that. So it's project based with multi-tendrils and being really creative in finding the solutions, but then also asking the right questions such that all these different pieces fit together well, and hopefully you have one team to go to and provide answers from. And I think HOBI's done a really good job assembling. Stephen, you're an example of this. Assembling really robust teams that are ready with answers, but also are asking the right questions to make every engagement really seamless, time efficient, cost efficient, and then at the end of the day, being able to defend what we're doing from a reporting standpoint, such that our clients know that they can rest easy on the data protection side, on the compliance side, on the reporting side. And it's really one of the funnest parts of our job, I think, is finding those places that we can build tools. For example, we have front-facing portals and things like that where clients can enter a serial number and, has HOBI processed that? Oh, there's my COD. Is this in flow right now? Where is this shipment? Things like that. And just, it's very much a living, breathing organism between us and our clients. It is really never a pick up and go type scenario. We are blessed enough to have had clients for decades now, and they have come to us to rely on us to for not only service and answers, but multi-level engagement on with our logistics teams, our engineering team, our reporting teams, our sustainability teams, such that this part of what they do, the management of their IT and cellular and data center assets is with a certified vendor that truly understands, all those important check boxes for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think something that you really champion and something that I think is a very underrated component of what HOBI does is the reporting. So a lot of the conversations that I'm having right now with people who are building out data centers and hyperscalers, the issue that they're running into is trying to develop relationships with the communities is hard because there's so much information out there that these data center producers are claiming isn't correct. So I think personally being able to handle a lot of the reporting from HOBI could help these companies develop these relationships. So it'd be awesome if you could speak to comprehensive auditable reporting that we can share to stakeholders and how that's a value add when it comes to
Right.
these. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, it's interesting that the industry has matured a great deal since we first got into it in the 90s, but also because of the fusion of information out there, clients have a lot of information and false information's coming at them, and our ability to clear the air. We were just talking this morning about data centers and communities pushing it back against new data centers, and the water issues and the power issues and things like that. And I'm super proud of HOBI's efforts to be forerunners in not only thought leadership, but actually through our industry organizations being in Washington, D.C. and looking at legislation around these pieces, looking at the certification pieces. How can we do what we do better? Yes, but also really understanding the concerns of our clients and making sure that what we're doing is something that they can stand on with full transparency and full compliance and and full documentation that will stand for years to come. I can tell you many stories of establishing the rigor that HOBI was going to process equipment even when certification was very new to the industry, and certainly making sure that what we did, how we were doing it applied across the board to our clients. We don't protect the environment for this client, but this client doesn't seem to really be concerned. No, it's applied across the board, and getting phone calls from clients years after serving them and saying, do you have records of what we shipped you in 1995? Well, of course we do. And here's your certificate of destruction. And here's the serial numbers. I just did a report for an international client reaching back to, I think it was 2015, and we did full match report against their inventory, what assets they wanted to make sure that they had retired everything that they could retire, look at their certificates for all of that, the data eradication, etc. And that is something I'm so incredibly proud of, that we have that kind of record keeping, that we have that legacy, that we have these certifications that continue to climb up, as far as what is certainly what's required, but then also what we can build to fulfill that requirement, to really separate HOBI as a first-in-class vendor, to make sure that we're ahead of the curve, and building the tools to stay ahead, and then also building an information set such that our clients, if they're querying, things about, carbon offset reporting, kind of trying to clear the air for them, because that's the space in which we live. They may only live in that space, 1 hour of the week. We live in that space every day, right? So we should be, very available with information. And we do that, we do that through blogging, we do that through newsletters, we do that, in client meetings and things like that. But we need to be the thought leaders in this space, such that when we meet with clients, they have a level of assurance that how we're processing equipment, how we're moving equipment, how we're certifying the services we provide is something that they can have a real level of confidence in. And there gets to be a lot of buzzwords in the business, circularity and and carbon reporting. What does that really mean, and how do we provide that? And I love to sit down with clients that have these really beautiful goals, and are looking at all these pieces. But we're the ones that are going to feed that data and really make sure that what we're doing is reporting to a level that they can take to the C-suite and put on their annual reports and say, yay, verily, we do what we say and we say what we mean. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
And make sure that all of that, is available. And, one of the advantages of being, and this, Stephen, because we've been doing this for so long, we had to build a lot of the tools that we still use from a reporting standpoint, which is good and bad. I think sometimes our engineers, get migraines over it, but by the same token, it gives us the ability to be nimble with our reporting and make sure it is fulfilling, a specific need for a client. I need my reporting based on the city you picked up. I need my reporting based on the country of origin. I need my reporting based on, cell phone assets versus IT, whatever it may be. And there's 1,000 different ways to split that up. But, that is part of the creative way we build these solutions. And it makes what we do so essential, not only for the corporations we serve, but also from a global perspective, that we can talk about resource recovery and materials management and rare earth metals and all those things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and bringing them to the forefront and being able to, applaud our clients that are saying, this is what we really want to do, and get them there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's a lovely piece of what we do every day.
Absolutely. We just celebrated our 34th year. So that is, that's fruit, that's legacy in and of itself. Just amazing what's been built over time, just the longevity of this whole thing that we're a part of. I would say, what service standards do you commit to from now and moving forward as HOBI continues to develop, escalation paths, reporting times, and how do you want HOBI to stay consistent, and how do you foresee HOBI staying consistent for years to come?
It all starts really, Stephen, with communicating with the client and really determining what their needs are. I can tell you with no hesitancy, we have SLAs with leasing companies that, as you know, are 48-hour reporting, 72-hour reporting, et cetera. We have built tools around being able to do serial matching, literally on the dock scan, such that, a client knows the day of what we've received at one of our facilities. And then from, a standpoint of, operational excellence, we are constantly improving how we go about processing equipment, whether it be, just expediency, which is an important part, but also accuracy. We are looking at the metrics around our internal process every single day.
Absolutely.
And then from a reporting standpoint, I just finished, as our annual meetings with many, many, many of our clients. What are we doing well? Where can we improve? What do we need to do in this next year to meet your objectives? And then also, as you mentioned, escalation. I just got a call from a client within minutes of our time together that, okay, we have assets need to be processed within a few days. And, and now we're looking at, do we need to move teams? Do we need to build a team around this specific process? And I love the fact that, as owners, managers, we can stay involved in those conversations and build those solutions in real time. We do have an incredible staff of account managers, business development, logistics, product specialists, et cetera. And as you know, our culture is we all get around the table, and go through the hot buttons for our clients. What do we need to do to meet these objectives, to build these tools? What resources do we need to assemble? And then hold ourselves accountable. As you said, we've been here 34 years. We plan to be here another 34, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Absolutely.
let's make sure that we're robust enough in our solutions. And again, I am very, very, very much a person that says if we can't do it to a level of excellence, we're not going to do it. And that you are only as strong as your team. And HOBI has been so blessed with incredible people managing the different aspects of what we do. Here in Chicago, some of our staff has been here almost as long as I have, 20, 30 years. Some of our processors in the back, our technicians, our kids grew up together, and
Wow.
so They truly have embraced the culture that we've established, that we care tremendously about what we do. The care and custody of our clients' assets is of the utmost importance to us every single day. And there is never, 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 a criteria that's missed or stepped over in processing equipment here. And so, I think accountability is a key word. Integrity is a key word. Living to SLAs and being able to sit down with a client and talk about, did we meet the SLA? If not, why not? How can we improve? One thing I love about HOBI carries multiple certifications, but one of those certifications many years ago, I think it was ISO 14, many years ago, that term continuous improvement started to be part of our culture. How do we continually improve at what we do? And certainly we're in an industry that's ever changing. And so those opportunities for continual improvement are always out there, right? But we have to be willing to embrace them and not sit back and say, okay, this is the HOBI way. No, this is the HOBI way that involves accountability and traceability and integrity. But how do we build on that to even make a better system, a better solution, and be even more responsive to the ever-changing world around us? You mentioned hyperscalers, data centers. Who would have known that, the demand for memory and data center space would escalate with the rapidity it has in the last 10, 12 months? Absolutely. It's an exciting space to be in. So we got to build solutions around it. Right. Yeah. So
100%.
it's a great industry to be in, and certainly I'm just incredibly proud of the team we've built, because that is the engine that drives this. And certainly, the clients that have entrusted us with their gear are near and dear to us, and we do take that responsibility incredibly importantly, and just make sure that we're always living up to that. I mentioned the term SLA, and hopefully exceeding the heck out of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that is all I have. Thank you so much. Here's for 34 more years coming. And awesome. Thanks so much, Cathy.
All right.